Craft here. I have been on fire with these lives. I've been really excited to get back to doing this. I've got some cool new changes coming to the studio and whatnot. But all that aside, here's what I want to talk to you about today. I want to ask you a question, and it's a deep question. When did you decide to be less than your worth? And I mean this as like a real serious endeavor, right? Because here's the deal. I talk to a lot of people and I've coached a lot of people over the years. I don't say it to like boast and be like, "Oh, I'm so special." Just I've got some experience with this, right? The there's a thing that happens with people where through the throes of life they make decisions about themselves. Right? I've talked about this before. People grow up reactively, they don't grow up intentionally. So my question of when did you decide to be less than your worth? Um it actually like pulls at a lot of things. First off, what is your worth? If you don't know what your worth is, how do you know when you decided to be less than that, right? Um, that's kind of a strange question when you have to define something that you decided to be less than without knowing what the thing is. Um, Most of you that I've had experiences with in the past don't know your worth properly, and I'm somebody who's done that same thing, right? Like I have very much through my life not properly uh, um, calculated my worth, and I don't mean that just in terms of dollars and cents. I mean that in terms of like worth. The 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 worth is sort of a here's an easy way to look at it. Compare the person that you want to be, the ultimate version of you, the you that you look up to and you feel all of your best self, right? And then you feel the parts that you are commonly instead of always being your best self, right? There's a tension between those two sort of elements, and part of that is just life. Nothing is ever a constantly all of the time one thing. We're not just always going to be our best selves, right? But if we looked at that as a measurement of worth and said, like, when did I decide to be less than that? You could see that you probably have compromised on many things in your life, right? You've probably decided to sort of take less money for a project or to attribute value that wasn't there within situations. Maybe you go, oh well, it'll be worth it to get into this group of people if I sacrifice this part of it. And listen, that's a strategy that works in some cases, but that works for people that really know their worth and know how to play that game, right? If you don't know your worth, you could end up getting swallowed up in it. It doesn't end up being worth anything to you because your intention really wasn't to get in the room and play the game or whatever. It was to play the small version of yourself, and you didn't realize that was what was happening, right? And I'm just giving some random illustrations. Maybe they don't resonate with everybody, but imagine being in a relationship that you knew you were in for way too long. Listen, I can tell you now as a more mature adult, um, there were good things and bad things about my ex-wife, right? And it did not work because we didn't jive in the right ways. We never should have gotten married. Like it was a total bad idea. And we stayed in that relationship for way too long just because we had got married. And I think we probably both took a step back in our own self-worth. We decided to be worth less in that case because we weren't holding a bubble around ourselves saying, no, this is at minimum what I want from life. The other way that I like to sort of explore this idea is going to the end of your life. Right? Ed Milet talks about this a lot, and this is something that I've kind of thought about many times in my life, but he really sort of championed the idea. And it's this idea of like, imagine that you're at the end of life where you die, right? And you've got to go face God. Now, I don't care what you believe in, just go with me on the analogy here, right? Um, you have to go face God, and God gets to judge you based on how well you lived. And you look back on your life and you see all the points that you failed to live up to the grandest version of yourself. Is that okay with you? Now, I'm not asking the question to point to the idea that it shouldn't be okay with you. I'm asking you, is it? Right? Because you might have some things that the rest of the world doesn't care or doesn't hold in any value that you value greatly. And you might be like, yeah, that is fantastic. And it's maybe not the absolute best version of myself, but it's a version of myself that I'm really happy with. Right? And that can be just fine. Gary Vee talks about this too, where, he's like, look, if you're happy, you already won the game. Like, don't listen to me about all this money making, social media, hustle culture stuff. If you're happy, you've already won. So, take that for what it's worth. But I want to ask you the question, when did you decide to be less than? Because when you can ask that question and answer it honestly, you can know that you did decide to be less than. And when you realize that you did decide to be less than your worth, you can actually do something about it, right? And it's okay. We all do it. We all make compromises. There's a reason there's this cliche of sort of the deal with the devil, right? It sounds good at the time. It just had some strings attached that you didn't realize. That's okay. Like, not literally making deals with the devil. That's probably not going to go so well with you. But for the analogy purpose, right? Um, so it's okay to have missed those things, is what I mean by this. It's okay to have made those quote mistakes because they still served you in some way. But if you can figure out that you've decided to be less than your worth, and you've decided to be something smaller than your greatness, and you've decided to play at a level that isn't worthy of you being in attendance, you can do something about it, right? I remember earlier in my life, one of my first businesses, we had some, it turned out disastrously, right? Like, between partners, and we're way too young and immature to have handled anything like adults, myself included, right? And it was a big mess. And I went through a couple years of really like moping around and not sure. And I'm a person who's just always been good at whatever I decide to get good at, right? I can focus on that. I can learn really fast. These are just things that I naturally have. People know that about me, and they see me do magic. They see me, talk to people. Back in that time, I was doing car audio, and I was really good at, car wiring, electronics, car customization, all of these things. And then I remember for a period of time, I was working at Kohl's afterwards. Like, I had to go get a job, right? This was in my 20s still. Um, and one of the people saw me at Kohl's, and they're like, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa. What are you doing working here?" Like it was this thing of like, "You're way too good for this." And I only remember it because I remember at the time kind of justifying it, going, "No, I'm okay with it," because I was, exploring spiritual peace or something, right? Um, I think we all have those moments in our lives where we've taken a notch down and maybe forgot that we were a notch up, right? And you have to get reminded of that sometimes. So I'm kind of here today to remind you, look, if you've taken a notch down, it's okay. It's not a big deal. If you've had to take a job that's below your worth, and I don't mean that from a snobbish standpoint. I mean that from a literal, like, you are far more capable and have talents and skills that the world wants, that you're withholding and staying in this small position. When do you decide to do something different about that? Because you had the power to make the decision to step down. When do you use that same power to make the decision to step up? When do you create the line in the sand that says, I'll never cross this again? This is who I am. This is what I can bring to the world. This is what I can bring to people in relationships. This is what I can bring to myself as an example in the world. This is where I can be proud of myself, right? These are all important things. And a lot of people will talk like, they've already got that figured out. And listen, I have been around some of the most confident people in the world. I've been around some of the most brave people in the world, people that take big, big risks, right? And you look at them and you go, wow, that must be like that must take some stuff. And I can tell you, underneath it all is deep insecurity. And it's okay. I'm not judging that, right? Insecurity is part of being a human. I don't care who you are. There's there the, even the person who acts like they're the most shameless, and just doesn't care about anything, they have some level of insecurity that's helping drive who they are, and they can create really good things with it. What the reason I'm saying it is because I don't want you to paint a picture that the people who are worth it, quote unquote, or the people who live up to their own standards that way, quote unquote, are somehow different or better or more naturally aligned or gifted than you, because they're not. I've seen people that can outdo me on compassion, empathy, task management, organization, like people that can outdo me in fantastic ways that are not glamorous in any way, right? And some people will say, well, you can get on stage and do what you do, or you can get on these Facebook lives, and they'll kind of look up to me for that. And I say, dude, that's nothing. Like, for me, that's just easy. The thing that comes easy to you is something I admire, right? And I remember being I was a teenager in martial arts, and I had joined a Filipino martial arts called Kuntao. And you martial arts junkies, it's a mixture of six different arts that included anything from stick fighting to grappling to, you know, kicking and all sorts of stuff. It covered all of the angles. A fantastic martial art, and I had a fantastic teacher. His name was Brian Buzz Smith, and Buzz was one of the first lessons he taught me back then. He said, uh, listen, I know you look at me as your teacher in martial arts. So, but you need to understand, even though you're only 17, there's things that you could teach me that I would never be able to learn without you. So just, I might be a black belt, you know, whatever over here, but understand you're a black belt in something else. And I'll help you get there if you help me get there. And I went like, at the time, I don't think I understood the wisdom in that, right? But it's always stuck with me in a certain way, and sometimes I forget it, right? Sometimes I get on these little things that just happen, right? I'm human like anybody. But what I want to remind you of is it doesn't matter how you compare yourself to anybody else. You have a level of talent, skill, something to be admired that other people just don't have. They feel that lack within themselves, and that's part of what makes a community. That's part of what makes people connect, right? Is like, hey, you're good at this thing that I'm not. Oh, and I'm good at this thing that you're not. Maybe we should talk, right? And we could both be better at things as a whole. And that's something that I just want to remind you with this question. When did you decide to be less than your worth? Because if you had the power to do that, then you have the power to choose to be at least your worth, if not more than your worth, right? How do you become more than your worth? You double down on your worth and you get better at it, right? Now you've increased the standard, you've raised the bar. And imagine if you took, and this was like your baseline level of worth. And I know this is a weird illustration because worth is such a strange concept, right? But let's say this is your baseline level of worth. And right now you're living here, right? If you could stretch up here every so often, right? And you could stretch up every so often, your average would raise a little bit. And this is where you could live as a norm because now the higher worth is higher than that, right? You don't have to be the best all of the time. You can just be progressing towards the best all of the time, right? So I don't know if that's helpful to anybody. I don't know if that's meaningful to you, but I felt like coming on and saying it today. I'm just going to come on and talk about these things. If you guys like it, that's fantastic. If not, listen, it'll be there for some time somewhere in the future for anybody else. So I appreciate you listening to my little rant, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Take care. Enjoy.